my
This
screen?
conference
Yeah,
will
yes.
now be recorded.
That's my screen name.
Oh, okay, okay. I'll mute myself.
Yeah. So hi all. Good morning. And as Neil was saying that for yesterday's session, yes, that all things are all those what we have learned yesterday. It is not required you to mug up all the stuffs. And to be very frank, nobody. I mean, in my experience, if I talk, I have never uh, got any interview questions or something related to those things. But that is only required to for you to understand that what all the bodies are involved in overall AML world in financial sector or something, right? So you go through it, the PPT which we will be sharing by today after our this session probably. So you just go through it. You need to just read out as a newspaper and try to understand few things that okay, why Basel Committee, why FATF, and why these pillars are required. So all those things. And even in today's session, we will be having few things which is part of your um, yesterday's session. I would say that it is a touch base of that as well, but that is totally different from what we have discussed yesterday. Okay, so today we have this all sessions which we will be conducting. For session 5 we have first beneficial ownership structure example. So beneficial ownership structure, in the sense it is talking about to identification of ultimate beneficial owner for any particular entity, how to identify, how to calculate that, how to find that it has any direct percentage of ownership, indirect percentage of ownership, and all those. And obviously I will be looking input from you guys, how to identify, just to understand that at what level you actually have that awareness or you know about it, how to identify a beneficial owner. Next we have enhanced due diligence for high risk customers. So this particular topic would be a touch base of the session what we have conducted for KYC. Next we have account opening, customer identification and verification. So this particular topic will give you more deep knowledge about how to identify and verify a particular customer. Next we have live case in the sense that we will be having one or two activity wherein you need to go through that particular case. It is kind of a case study. You need to identify that particular case study, what you feel that you have a requirement to identify any beneficial owner, or what is you feel that it has some red flag on that, if at all it is applicable. Next we have responsibility and accountability of a compliance officer, which is really a very huge topic. But we have just created a few slides wherein that will give you a more knowledge and a deeper knowledge about the compliance officer. Next we have establishing a culture of compliance. So culture of compliance, here it is talking about only and only the operation side, how they work and what is the culture and how it actually work in a financial institution. Okay, let's start then. uh, this particular diagram is a beneficial ownership structure example. Okay, so Neil, probably you can check on chat if someone has any response on this. Probably I would like to take a call from all of you first. That first question would be, who all are aware that how to identify beneficial ownership?
Sure, Manish. I'll let you know if anybody has any question.
Yeah, even though if someone doesn't know, they can write no. If someone has that, okay, I have sound knowledge, probably I don't have much knowledge about it, or something like that. If you have any response from your side, you can please comment on the chat box.
So Srikanth has asked who is holding 25% of more. Okay, so he has some understanding about how to find it, and rest others
Great.
I see no response. So I assume we'll start from the beginning.
Yeah.
Patu says 25% for low risk and 10% for high risk. So, Patro, yeah, it depends upon the jurisdiction's KYC, the central KYC as well as the global KYC. Okay, jurisdiction as well as the global central KYC. So it depends on the institution as well, how they see customer and how they have defined. People, financial institution like in Singapore and APAC region, they even go for 5% as well sometimes. So it depends on your customer, how you assess risk and how you want to see. So that's a picture you have to create, understand how to assess the risk of a client. Okay. So Manish will start on with the as a beginner, and as
Yes.
a beginner you have to understand, and you will trust me. After this, you will be able to clear out, or you will be able to identify any of the holding structure whichever you find in your career or you want to do clearly from the bottom to top. And there are two methods, I guess, from bottom to top. I forgot the names. There is a name, Manish, if you remember. Drill down method is there, right? Two methods
Cycling.
are there.
Yeah, as far
Uh,
as I remember, one is the cycling ownership structure. That is cycle been created. That is
oh, okay.
one.
Go on.
Next one. Yeah. So this is one of the example which is really easy to understand, and probably in near future, whenever you find any ownership structure to be drilled down, or you need to identify a UBO, this will probably help you all. Okay, and any questions, any point of time you have, please type in the chat box. Okay,
Okay.
so we'll start now. We have corporation A. Okay, so for example, one of the entities going to onboard, and you as an analyst or a senior analyst having a company and the document in your hand as corporation A. Okay, the documents and all, guys, we will discuss on our next slide probably, how to which all documents are actually required and from where you will identify the ownership structure for that particular company. Okay, so for corporation A, it is owned by corporation B as 80% and corporation C as 20%. Okay, so any ownership structure, if you see, it will be having 100%. Okay, so by corporation A, it is 80%. Corporation C is owning corporation A with 20%. So you could see it has 100%. After that, corporation B is owned by 80% by B1 and 20% by B2. On corporation C, C1 owns 40% and C2 owns 60%. After that, if you could see, we have two individuals over here who owns 49% and 51% on C2. Okay, I will go into a deep later. Just this is just a information I am sharing to give you a clear picture. One of the individual alone owns 40%, own 100% in C1. So this particular entity or a company is owned 100% by this individual who is owning 100%. On this, if you see, you have 75% owned by this particular company, by this individual, 75% to this B1, and this guy owns 25% on B1, and this lady owns 100% on B2. Okay, now how to identify what is the actual percentage this particular individual own for corporation A? It is not compulsory that this individual, it is not, or means not compulsory means it is fact that this individual obviously is owning some percentage of shares on corporation A. And this lady, if you take an example, who is owning 100% of here, but obviously she has an indirect percentage of ownership to corporation A. Any questions anyone has till now? Probably you can chat, or you can just write on a chat box. If at all it is clear, probably you can write clear. Thank you. Okay. So now how to identify indirect percentage of ownership? There is two different things. One is direct ownership and second is indirect ownership. Okay. So if you talk about corporation B owning at corporation A, it called as direct ownership. For this particular individual who is owning 75% on B1, it is called a direct ownership. That means the first layer of any ownership structure, it is a direct ownership, wherein there are two or three more different layers, wherein this particular lady, if you talk, it will have a indirect ownership on corporation B and indirect ownership on corporation A. Okay, via B2. I have a simple calculation how to identify this lady has a what percentage of ownership for corporation A. So what my calculation is, what I usually do is, my experience is, so we will start from extreme left. Okay, this guy 75%. So my calculation how I do usually is 80 into 80, or else you just remove this zero, you just calculate 8 into 8. Okay, so 8 into 8 is 64, 64, and here it is 75. So what I usually do is I calculate 75% of 64. So can anyone tell me on the chat box what is the percentage of ownership this guy owns indirectly on corporation A? I will repeat my calculation again. 8 into 8, 64, and 75% of 64. So what would be the indirect percentage of that particular individual? So Patho says 48%. Anyone has any other input, or you all are with Patro? 47, 48. Okay, 48. That's right. So can anyone tell me what would be the percentage of this lady who is owning 100% to B2? Indirect percentage, you just tell me about how much she is owning at corporation A. So I will repeat 16%. 16. 16. That's right. So anyone has any question till here? If yes, you just type your question on the chat box. If no, just type no. Okay. Clear? No? Fine. Now, it is mandatory for any financial institution whom they are onboarding, they are supposed to identify the ultimate beneficial owner. Why it is required is a question, right? So it is a requirement. First of all, is obviously as per regulatory body, that what regulatory of that particular jurisdiction is asked for. It, as Neil was saying, that it might be 25%, wherein it is a low risk. It differs when it is high risk. You have to identify or drill down till 10%. Even more stringent jurisdiction or any country, if you talk about like Singapore, they sometimes drill down to 5%, 3% also. Even I have done for 3% drill down as well. There is a requirement for that particular jurisdiction, and that is what we do actually. Now, identification of your ultimate beneficial owner is why it is required. I was talking, right? So it is required to identify whether this individual who is owning this particular company is a legal person or not. Legal person in the sense that, does this particular lady has any link to sanctions? Is she fraud? Or this particular company is being opened, means corporation A is being opened to do a money laundering? There might be a possibility. So this lady is hiding over here after two different mediators, which is two different companies, which is corporation B and B2. In your career, you might get more different layers of companies. It is just two layer, if you could say. It has only two layer. You might get 7 layers, you might get 8 layers, so you might get 10 layers also, and different scenarios. So what financial institutions or bank does is they just to mitigate the risk to identify whether this individual who is owning ownership on corporation A is not involved in any is not involved into any fraud activity, or she is a money launderer, or she is a pep. That might one of the reason that okay, by their own uh, political and exposure, she might have corruption money with her. So why don't she would have created one company with different layers. So identification of UBO is compulsory, just to mitigate the risk and identify the relationship what is gonna set up with the bank is with the right person or not. Okay, right, Neil? So you have anything to add, Neil, on this?
No, Manish, I think you covered everything.
Thank you.
And guys, just make sure, see, as Manish said, uh, this one to identify UBO, I think that's one of the most important thing in whatever document you collect. Okay, so you need to understand and find out if somebody who is not a UBO and you still want the document just because you didn't calculate it properly, that will be a default on your side. Okay, so you have to calculate it so exactly and properly. For example, this lady, if I wanted to calculate, UBO is ultimate beneficiary owner. Okay, Varun. So it's same like beneficial owner. So we call it UBO. Who wants to speak such a long? Instead, you can abbreviate it. So this lady, what Mani just showed, this lady, if you want to calculate somebody who is which is a low risk company, or want to your bank requires bank procedures require you to calculate only 25%. So will this lady be a UBO? Yes, no? No. Okay. I see. No. Exactly. So you don't need to ask for further document for this one just because she is UBO. So that's how you have to prepare. Go on, Manish.
Yeah. This is one thing. So Neil, do you want me to cover identification for the documents, or you have on our next slide?
No, no, I'll cover it. I'll cover it up. Just you can, if you want to have any, I mean, show anything or any talk about this UBO more, you can do that, Manish. Then
Yeah.
I'll cover it.
Yeah, fine. So, guys, just for your more understanding, whenever you identify that, okay, this particular individual is UBO, and to be means by name itself, you can see that it is named as beneficial. Beneficial means she or he will be getting benefit out of the profit what the company have involved in this particular ownership structure. So always UBO will be an individual, not an entity or any company. Okay, so when we actually use a term in our AML world, we actually call this particular company as companies or entity or corporation or something like that. But for individuals, we usually call it as UBO, which is ultimate beneficial owner. Okay, so fine, Neil, probably you can take on later whenever like we have
Sure,
anything on document part or the screening part or something.
sure. So what I'll do, Manish,
Yeah.
I'll start presenting it because ultimately, after 3 to 4 slides, I have to present, right?
Um, Fine.
Because of the live case.
Yeah, yeah.
So mm, let me know once you see my screen.
Yes, we can.
Mm,
anyone has any question, they can chat. They can drop their question on chat box. Probably Neil, I will handle that.
Sure. Mm, okay. So now think as a customer where you have think a customer where you have to identify as high risk, or you assess the risk as a high risk just because your bank has a list or your financial institution has already predefined list, and you think that the customer is high risk just because neither the customer is a regulated one, not a listed one, just a private entity where and also the jurisdiction might be from some not, I would say, not that renowned country, or with not having a value worthy AML programs and implementation within the financial institution as per government and regulators. So you have to conduct enhanced due diligence. Okay. Now, initially, what Manish had explained in session 2, where he was more talking about as a holistic approach, how you how you arrive on particular region to identify risk, and what all scenarios you have to keep in mind in order to do a KYC on a customer. Right now, what we'll discuss more about what exactly you need in order to perform that enhanced due diligence. Okay, just like for example, you got an onboarding of a customer, you want to onboard it, they want to trade for a product what your bank or financial institution has offered, and you have to do a enhanced due diligence, okay, and verification on that customer. So how will you begin? Just a real-time scenario. So the first point you see, source of fund and wealth. Okay. So don't get confused between source of funds and source of wealth. Okay. This most of the guys, they usually get confused so many times that whether what to ask from the client, whether it is source of wealth or source of fund. Okay. So when a customer introduces himself as a new customer to the bank, okay, you want to know, they also introduce maybe a huge amount that they will be depositing as a in the savings account or portfolio management account or current account, whichever account is there, or they want to trade, or they want to use the brokerage services, whatever. So you should know that what is the source of the funds, okay, and what a customer is doing based on the occupation of the customer is a source of wealth as well as source of fund. So I would say, see, customer who introduces money, he might have got from somewhere, right? He might have got it from somewhere. Okay. And what he does is different. And I mean, if he's a salaried person, for example, you are a salaried person, you might be getting salary on every last day of the month or first day of the month. Okay. Okay. So that becomes your one second, one second. हाँ गेट बंद कर, गेट बंद कर प्लीज. मैं आ रहा हूँ. Manish, can you take on just for this slide? I'll just come back. Hello.
Yeah.
Manish. Yeah. Please take on this. I'm so sorry, यार. मम्मी की तबीयत खराब हो गई. I'm just coming.
Okay. Hi. So we were talking about. I think I have to present. Hold on. Yeah. Okay. So I was talking about sorry, Neil was talking about source of fund and source of wealth actually, right? So uh, if we talk about source of fund, we are referring to the client's fund are received from. So the client's fund and received from, and the wealth will be relate how the client came to have the fund. Okay, so I think Neil was giving one of the example. Now, for example, there is a individual who is gonna open an account in any of the financial institution or a bank. At that point of time, they need what is the source of fund they have and what is the source of wealth. Okay, so wealth would be, for example, I have some wealth which has been given by my parents. My parents, in the sense, like if someone who is given as a land, or they have written something on me wherein the wealth is being generated by someone by in inheritance, you can talk about. And source of fund, if you talk, source of fund would be, one second, I'm not able to present. Neil, are you there?
Yeah, I'm so sorry. So guys, yeah, let's resume on. So yeah, your source of wealth, as a you introduce the money. So for example, you got money from your inheritance from your parents or anything, that becomes your source of wealth, where your wealth came from. Source of funds, what you're getting as your daily wage, or like you are doing a business or something, whatever you do as an occupation is your source of fund. Okay, so you have to disclose those. Okay, so somebody introduced like 10 lakh rupees just because they got it from a trust where their father mother had created for him or her. That becomes their source of wealth, and they did introduce it to your bank or financial institution, your fund. But the customer, that particular customer, is also doing a business of, for example, electricals or anything, sells switches, or even owns a fish marketing shop or anything. That becomes his source of funds. Okay, so there's a difference. Okay, so what they do as an occupation becomes source of fund, and what they got money just because it's a huge money or some from somewhere from inheritance or anything becomes source of wealth, your wealth. Okay, so then I am on the wrong slide, I guess. Yes, and the next one is occupation. The type of business we just mentioned. The type of business is one of the important part of risk assessment as well. Okay, type of business, geography, and product. Right. Uh, is there a limit of funds? There is no limit, right? As Manish told clearly, there is no limit. Okay, a bank will never deny any customer if he is introducing money. Trust me. So whatever maximum you can do as a protector is just mitigate the risk by taking as much as document as you can. That doesn't mean anything. Okay, it means accurate and meaningful. Okay. The third one is financial statement. So you also would have been asked so many times by the bank, what is show me or a statement or anything. The same goes for a customer as well. If it is a company, definitely financial statement will be there, for annual report will be there, quarter report will be there. They have disclosed everything over there. Okay, simple. Then references, they also ask for references, your previous customer or any ex-customer or existing customer or anything. So they might have asked it. Uh, uh, so anything they might have asked for, and what I will. Okay. Gate band kar de, please. Sorry. So banking references, anything somebody will refer that customer, so that becomes like just to mitigate risk. It's not new customer, so it's not if it is a stranger, or like if some all of a sudden somebody came in and just want to open an account. So reference definitely helps. If somebody who's already having an account knows that guy, for example, Morgan Stanley, they do not open an account directly with a customer. Whatever money you have doesn't matter until unless you have a reference. Then only you'll are eligible to open an account over there, right, Manish?
Yeah.
Morgan Stanley. Okay. So the next is domicile. Domicile is like your geographic location. Again, important part to assess the risk. You already know about it. So the proximity of customer residence. The proximity is like nearby or the area where they usually reside. If you live somewhere in Telangana, why would you go in a state, for example, Bihar, and open an account and then come back to Telangana and work? No, right? There should be a reason. Okay. Then description of customer primary trade area, whether international transactions are expected to be routine. So that's your expected activity after you are opening and after you have opened an account with the bank. So they also expect you to do. What would you do? Are you a salaried person? Normal transactions will be there. Your basic Google Pay or anything, Phone Pay, anything. Or but if you do a business internationally, you directly send money through wire to different countries. Wire is a method of sending money from one jurisdiction to another jurisdiction, or even within jurisdiction as well, domestic as well. For example, what methods in India are used, like IMPS, RTGS, NEFT. These are all wire transfers. So the next one is description of business operations, the anticipated volume of currency and total sales. So that's like you assume as a account opener, you assume it that okay, this much opening will be this much cash in and out, or like money in and out will be there based on the client's profile. So you assume and you created such a for example estimate. For example, somebody who says I have a business, a shop, or but I have an import export business, okay, which I do apart from this handicraft shop. So there will be transfers from different jurisdictions, and they have mentioned that I usually import it to England. So you will understand, okay, if something coming from England as money to this account is okay until it's not a big amount all of a sudden, or like rapid transactions or high volume transaction, but fair amount and as per inline in the business with inline the expected activity from the customer is fine, totally fine, right? So they you assume and you estimate. But if some for example few of the pounds are coming directly from Indonesia all of a sudden, or like you get a high volume transaction somewhere from Indonesia that was not expected from the customer, right? Because he's doing business, he's doing import exports in England or China. He has told clearly. So why would somebody send it send him money from Indonesia? Not possible. Even if it's possible, you have to ask them. You have to mitigate risk, so you have to take your steps accordingly. Okay. And the description of business operations, the anticipated volume I just told you, explanation of changes in account activity I just told you. Okay. Now read the last line, which is in green. FATF also recommends obtaining approval of senior management to commence or continue the business relationship, and requiring the first payment to be carried out through an account in a customer name with the bank subject to similar CDD standards. Okay, that is followed everywhere. Okay, senior management approval will always be there. Just one account doesn't matter. Still, senior approval will be there because they are gonna be your customers. Okay, I'll go. I was muted. Hello. Is it clear now? Okay, thank you. So for legal persons, Manish just told you that in the previous chart that Manish was describing, is like there were individuals as well as corporates. So those corporates were referred as legal persons because they are registered as a company, proprietor, I would say a firm, partnership firm, trust, uh, uh, real estate or anything. Those are all legal persons. And natural persons, those UBOs, individuals who are taking decisions or who are getting benefit out of it. So what all documents you will require for as a legal person, because you're going to onboard that corporate and you have to find somebody who's taking decisions behind that corporate, that is fine. So the name, legal form status, how do you find that? You should have some document, for example, your article of incorporation, memorandum of incorporation, the incorporation certificate, the registration license number. These all are common documents. Okay. And the next one, गेट बंद कर दो यार, कितनी बार बोला मैंने? नहीं. So permanent address will be required. The proof of incorporation will be required. Mailing and registered address, you can read it out, very easy. Identify the natural person. Manish just showed you about the UBO. Contact telephone numbers, official identification number. These are real-time scenario requirements, right, guys? So always remember these. At least few common ones will always be there. You be it at CDD also, in a low risk or maximum to high risk. Few documents will always be there, and maximum document for EDD are these: contact telephone numbers, your identity of the beneficial owner, nature and purpose of activity of a legal entity, what they do. Okay, I'm a real estate, that's my nature. I earned from that real estate business. So my company is a real estate firm, and we actually create buildings and malls. So those are their source of fund, right? They usually earn from those businesses. Okay, then the financial situation, what is there? If companies defaulted any time in past, or like company has been into bad reputation or not able to pay their loans or anything, just like your individual CIBIL. Then amount, number, type, purpose, frequency of transactions expected. So again, you create a graph of expectation that, yeah, based on all the documents provided and the client's profile, we expect that this much money will be coming in, this much is their net worth, this much property they hold, destination of fund, they already told that we will be sending money from these types. Okay, somebody is re-logging in due to bandwidth issue. Okay, I think there is a lag in Suraj system. Let's wait for 1 minute. Okay, Suraj, are you there? Yes, if you are there again. Suraj is facing some technical issue. Okay, I'll drink water then. Let's wait for Suraj. Meanwhile, guys, you can read it out and read the last point as well. That is also important, which is in green. Suraj, are you there? Okay, let me know what point you want me to repeat. Okay, I'll restart from there. What point do you want me to repeat, Suraj?
Like from the incorporation of the legal person.
Okay. So where was I? Incorporation, Manish, which line? Do you remember? Yeah, first one only. So legal name, status, proof of incorporation of legal person. Okay, so as a legal person, what would you ask? You will ask your memorandum, article of association, incorporation certificates, the license numbers, the proof of like getting license. In India, even if you type like registry search, government registries, sorry, government registry search, so many things you will get. You have to find out a government website. Okay, always refer to a government website. Otherwise, no. Even if you get a actual certificate which looks like a government issued certificate, but it is available on a private website, don't go for it. Never go for it. Always go on reliable websites. Never go for Wikipedia or anything. Okay, so always go on trusted sources. So you will get online proofs as well as sometimes country or jurisdiction law prefers not to disclose it publicly. So you might have to ask client at that point, but you should know that okay, it is not available anywhere just because of the laws in that particular jurisdiction. You have to ask client. Okay, for example, Cayman Island, it is not available publicly. You need access to it. You have to ask client. They will provide you. Okay, and easy to get in UK, easy to get in US, but some countries they have their own laws and jurisdiction. Then second point, I just told you permanent address. The permanent address is a principal place of business. Principal place of business means you are registered in Singapore, but you are operating in India. You need both the addresses proof. Okay, registered proof always required, but business address is also required. Okay, so they are conducting businesses. Their website will be there, clearly shown. Then there will be few other telephone bills or anything, your landline bills, or government approved things, documents. Those are like proof of business address. Mailing register address told you. Then identification of natural person. So as Manish told, UBO should be identified in all the corporates where you don't know or whether the entity is private or anything apart from regulated or listed. Okay. Contact telephone numbers. I told you official identification number, if any. If any is not there, it's fine. If it is there, you have to find it and you have to get it. Everybody has their, like, your PAN card number is there, official company license number is there, so many numbers. TIN number is there in US, IRS number, TIN number. Powers that regulate or bind the legal person, that is there in their board of directors resolution. So whatever powers or incorporation certificate will not have, but their articles of association will have these if it's a company. And partnership agreement directly shows like who are the partners who own, so their powers will be there shown. Okay, and remember to read what is the difference between memorandum of association and articles of association of a company. That is important, guys. Okay. Identity of beneficial owners told you, nature and the purpose of activities, financial situation of an entity. You should understand clearly that what is financial situation, company's credibility, company's bad reputation, company's good reputation, company's almost everything, how it is going to the market, have it expanded in past or anything, went bad, dissolved, bankruptcy filed. These are the things. Expected use of account, what you expect from the information you got from the client. You expect that client will do this much of transaction, this is expected out of him, these are the jurisdictions he will send money. So you create a summary and you log that in, and you then match with the actual activity what the client is gonna do after you have opened the account. Okay, then last one, obtaining a copy of certificate of incorporation, memorandum and article of association, partnership agreement, or any other document certifying the existence of entity. For established corporate entities, reviewing a copy of financial statement audited. We always go for audited. If it is not audited, you can ask for it, but always go for audited only. Much reliable. Okay. The next one, guys, account opening, customer identification, and verification. So each new customer who is a natural person as an individual, okay, that opens a personal account should be asked for legal name, residential address, basis of risk. So these are real-time requirements, right? Also the business address, post office number, landline, mobile, nationality. These are like you already remember. All you have to do is just recall those stuffs. You already know these stuffs already. I'm sorry. Uh, an official personal identification number, type of account, and nature of banking relationship, and never compare India's KYC with other world KYC. Okay. Every jurisdiction's KYC is different. Okay. They might have businesses also which are different from India, which are might not be legal in India, or all might not be legal over there, but legal in India. So that's all. And Manish already told that any information required details not found in, to authenticate. Manish already told any information and required details not found on any authenticated website, then it leads to request for more information, RFI, with the help of relationship manager. Signature proof required. So these are basic requirements. You should learn it. Like you should always remember these things. Okay. And I'll just go on for the live activity. Okay. Already 45 minutes done. So this live anything if you have not understood, just let me know, guys, because right now I assume that you have understood what we have included in the previous slides. Okay, is it all clear? Because this is gonna be a live case, so you should know those things. You should have understood those things. Then only I can proceed. So is it all clear? Whatever I showed you in the previous slides, just say yes. Type yes. That's it. Any question, any doubt, just let me know right now before I begin with this one. Okay, so I see 2 yeses. Just be a little more active, guys. Just say yes, remaining ones, if you have a chat box access. Okay, 4 yeses, fine. And this fifth one, okay. So see, this is a live activity where there are 2 companies. Okay, so you read it out again. I'll just read out once. So 2 entities called Sunnyside Road Land Limited and Gilead Cheltenham Limited, both entities registered in UK, have approached to you as co-borrowers of a property investment facility who want to invest around 5 million pounds to fund acquisition of a property they want to buy, located in central London location, cost of around 7 million pounds. You're required to draft a, so that's again a loan from a bank or as a financial institution. You're required to draft a corporate structure chart leading to an individual holding 25% or above, and to complete the 3D form via obtaining publicly available information. Keep in mind that all the applicable UK regulations on KYC and AML. You are required to produce list of requirements which you would pass to the customer, bearing in mind to minimize the reliance on the customer and customer contact to zero. So that means you have to try your best in order to find whatever you can on these 2 entities, because you can't go again and again to customer back and forth and just asking so many documents and irritating them. They are bringing money to us, don't irritate them. Okay, they want a loan, so much profit they will be giving to the bank, such a big loan they want. Okay, so never do that. Okay, never send a unnecessary email to a customer just because you want something and you're not able to find it. Try finding it internally within the team. I'll take help, but no, don't go for it just like that because you think it is not there. Okay, so try to minimize the burden on customer and try to compensate everything from whatever you get. Valid proof only. Okay, guys. So I'll cover this entity, Sunnyside Road Land Limited, and you can go on. I mean, after this session, you can try for Gilead. These are two different entities. Okay, so I'll just take this one, Sunnyside Road Land Limited. Okay, and this one is for your after like homework after session. Okay. Hmm. So Sunnyside, I'm gonna exit this. Okay, and I'll just copy the name of Sunnyside Land Limited. Okay, and I'm gonna mm, mm, sorry, this is not Chrome, so it is a little slow. I just pasted it. Okay, so me and Manish, they all usually work. We have worked so much on UK entities and all. So we know that whatever document, the valid document is there is available on company house in UK. So in UK, they don't have state registries. They have one common registry, which is called Company House. Okay, and in US, you have state registries. For example, company registered in Delaware, company registered in uh, I would say Illinois or Washington or wherever. They have their state registries. But in UK, it is one. They don't have states; they have counties. Okay, so I just typed this one, guys, and I got the first result as a company house. So I'll just go for it. Companyhouse.gov.uk. Beta version doesn't matter. .gov.uk .gov should always be there. That's a validity of a and the validity and worthiness of a website. I just got it. You don't have to sign in or register in Company House. That is for like extra special features they provide and they let you to access. So this one I see this is registered. This is the license number. I got it. So you should have a checklist and you just keep ticking it like, okay, I got this one, this one, this one. This is the address. Okay. Company type private entity and nature of business, buying and selling of own real estate. So okay, make sure it is not expired. It is still active. Okay. Then I see I want to know about the I just told you the legal persons. I mean legal person proof is there in the directors. So I see 3 officers, 1 resignation. I'll click on the current officers. There are only 2 people. One is Michael Patrick Pengleton, and the second one is Simon Alexis Guy Miller. Okay. Now these both are directors. Always look at this one. It should not be a signatory. It should be a director. Again, this is also a director. So both are important. So you have to pick 4 to take a PDF and proof. Keep it with you and the log stating that this is a proof of directors of my company. Okay, my parents' company director and all, I don't care. My company director should be there. Okay, then I'll go for the someone who because I want to identify the UBO. So I'll go for someone who has the interest in the company with the shareholding. So I see one name. It says 2 active persons with significant control, 0 active statements. So let's see both. So I need to find someone who, because the question asked, just as I told you, how much percentage for a UBO? 25% or more. Okay. That means exact 25% will also work. So this guy owns 25%, but not more than 50%. So ultimately he becomes our UBO, right? Okay, this guy is there who is a UBO, but what about remaining 75%? We don't know. So this company owns more than 25%, but not more than 50%. Okay, I am okay with that. Fine. It can be 49 as well. It can be 26 as well. Okay. So let's go to this particular company. So this is the parent company who has interest. And I also see that this guy is also a director as well, right? So he's there in the proof of directors. So to collect all the requirements based on the requirements of what we had shown you as individual requirements. Okay, for this guy, names, ID, passport, verification, TIN number, anything. I'll just, instead of copying the name, I'll just copy the registration number. Easy. Hibernian Developments Limited. I clicked on search. I see this one, same name. If you type the name, that you will get too many results. Easy to find, but yeah, this one is pretty easier by using just the license number. I see this is a parent. Register address, this one, this one, this one. Again, the same locality, London. Building projects, again into real estate. Fine. Parent is also same. I see people don't want to go for directors. I already got it for my company who has significant control. Again, one more entity holds more than 75%. See, this is how your structure will start to create. Okay. One more company, again I have to go for this one. Okay, because I need to know who is the natural person behind everything, every company. Okay, at the end I'll just paste the name. Got this record, clicked, again the same locality, jurisdiction, management company, financial management and all. Okay, fine. This is a Capital Limited. Yes, they have their capital management company, finance management and everything is there. So this is slightly different. It can happen, no problem. Coca-Cola also has few other things that they do apart from selling Coca-Cola. Okay. Volkswagen Finance is also there, not only the cars. So I see, I'll go to people, person having significant control. This guy who was one of the directors, I remember, in our entity, has owning more than 75%. So do you see how many entities were there in between, and finally we got like 3 entities were there, right? And you got this one, this guy, and the guy who was one more guy, I forgot his name. I can his name was also guy, Alex something. Okay, so when you do that, you have to create an ownership structure and you have to take all the proofs as valid proofs with the proof of ownership, proof of intermediate parents, proof of UBO, and even you can go for subsidiary. It will be there in filing history. All you have to do is click on anything or like confirmation statements. No, nothing is there. I'll director, if there is change in director, latest one, you can take that. Always go for the latest ones, right, guys? Don't go for like maybe expired ones or like last year's, last year's. always go for at least 1 year, within 1 year of span. Okay. Total exemption of full accounts and all these are all there, and then I'll click on this one. Anything changed? I don't know. It is not responding. Page is not responding. So if you go down to next page, annual return and all will be there, financial statement will be there, incorporation certificate will be there if you want. Anyway, you can take this also as a proof by as an overview of this company, parent registration proof and all. So these are basic things that you have to do. Then I will show you how it looks like. Ownership structure. So you have to create it just to make others understand. If somebody else want to know, you will go for approval on everything. So you should be able to make them understand easily that how it works. Let it open. You don't need to be a designer or something. It's like fine, easy, simple, yet complicated. Sometimes it happens. This was an easy one. Try for the other entity which is there in the as a co-applicant. It will not be that easy. Trust me. So this is how I created. Manish is a good designer, so he'll create like way better than me. I know. So this is how you do it. It's the same like creating a ownership structure just to make others understand and understand it to yourself. This is not a proof. This is just a structure that you have created based on the documents you got. So this is no proof. Nothing is there. The director has not signed it. Okay. This you cannot consider that as a proof. But that is for something which will help you to understand the KYC much better on this client. Okay. I took this proof of directors. Okay. And then incorporation certificate, the proof of that website, legal name registration proof, again the website name proof, ultimate parent incorporation certificate. I'll just open it for you. That looks like the same as website. So I downloaded it from filing history, incorporation, and then the page is not responding. I'm so sorry. This one. See, it's the actual one, but you can take proof of website as well. Okay. Ultimate parent ownership. Again, you have to take a proof. Sorry, it's taking time. Oh no, it did not. Annual return was there. Company director, investor as well. Total number of shareholding by Michael Patrick Singleton. He becomes UBO, and the other guy who initially owned 25% in our entity also becomes the UBO. Simple. Did you understand everything? Just say yes. Then I'll go for adverse media news. I tried to find on Google. I took a PDF later. So I use few of the lines just to be on the safer side, that if entity has been involved into any crime or fraud in past, didn't get anything. Okay. So I'll just resume back to slide, and these are all the documents. Okay. And what all you require is like your proof. The remaining ones becomes the proof that you require, and you need to ask to client. Okay. So what and how? We got the list of directors, we got the list of principal shareholders, UB of borrower, 25% verification, assessment of source of wealth of the customer, what they do, what they've got. They have created so much of projects, assessment of source of funds for the customer. Okay. They are into real estate business. Internet searches and finding, we did it. Okay. You want to search more, you can go over the website as well, just to be more on safety side. Whether they have a website or not, it's fine if they don't have it also, but usually such a big company will have it. Okay. Purpose and business is justification for loan, destination of funds. You have to ask them. Purpose is there. Purpose is there in the question. See, purpose is there. Destination, again, it will be UK only, just because they have given the clear purpose that you're going to buy something and they need loan for it. PEP check, we didn't see any check. I checked it already. So I use these few strings, put company name over here, and then use these strings. Okay, adjacent to the company name with the two double dots, inverted dots, inverted commas, and you use the same and just try to search. Assess the risk, sector risk. So it's a real estate risk, real estate property. What do you think the risk will be for this one? Sector risk. Tell me fast. High, low, medium. Company is a real estate. Fast. It is a high risk business, medium risk, low risk, high. Okay, got it. I got option high, high. Fine, fine, fine. What is the jurisdiction risk? It is UK. Tell me. High, medium, low. What do you think? UK. Low. Okay. Got it. The product is loans and it's a bank. So that's a basic product of loans. Okay. Then becomes low. Low, low, and high. Somewhere, somehow it will fall in medium. Okay. Right, Manish? Are you there?
Yes, Neil, that's right.
Okay. Anything, Manish, you want to add on whatever we did as research?
No, that was very simple and crisp actually, Neil. And every time when you search anything on Google, be more focused on from where you are picking the details. Like Neil already mentioned that it should be authenticated website wherein we mostly focus as AML world, that it should be a gov.in or which is related to your government website or something. Finding out some information which is not on authenticated website, whether it is a third party or something, the policy and the procedure of the bank says that we will not accept. So be more vigilant on that part. Whatever information you are picking, it should be from reliable source. It should not be any third party website wherein anyone can go and edit, anyone can go and change the information. Those websites just avoid. Even few websites like if you take any information or nature of the business from Wikipedia, most of the bank does not accept that. Bloomberg is one wherein you can very well get the information about the company, what they are into, the list of directors, the senior management and all. But those website also, the policies talks that um, are not actually authenticated, or there might be a changes wherein the Bloomberg or any third party site have not done a changes as applicable, but the government website or any registry websites or regulatory body if you talk, or any exchange like trading stock exchange if you talk. From their information if you pick, probably that will be reliable and perfect.
Yeah. So Varun has asked how to do a pep check in Google and have to insert director name. Yes, you can do that, Varun. Director name as well as UBO name. Both. A company cannot be pep, right? For the individual, if it is he is a pep, just put in that person's name over here, and then put the remaining strings that you will get from the financial institution within they might have created, or you can have like this one, create for yourself. Okay, and put bribe, drug, felony, misconduct, negligence, theft, or pep, or corruption, or anything, whatever crime you know, just mention and then put enter and close the brackets. Okay, that's a code of a string, and then you will get results. That's easy. Family member is pep, then okay. So right now, if he himself is not a pep, and family members, if you want to know, again you have to put the same name, or you can even go for surname search. Put the surname and search and try to find out, and there will be one more pep screening. So in order to, if you don't get any result on Google just because of the family member and everything, okay, that doesn't mean you don't have tools as well. So you will have separate tools where you can, as we directed you in the session where we were discussing about screening. So there you will find if something is there. Otherwise, there are very less chances that if you visited and if you have a annual return and that guy is a director and all, UBO is not a PEP. There's chances of him being a PEP. So we did that already. And with surname also, just type in surname or like middle name. Just type in the common names and put PEP. If it is there with this string, definitely it will come on your external search. Otherwise, internal tool, definitely you can narrow down the searches. You got it? We call them associated PEP. Yes. Right. Got it, Varun? Buddy? Varun, say, okay. Okay, now on to you, Manish. We only have 2 to 3 slides remaining. I hope you found this research useful, and try to research the remaining sunny side, this one by your own self. Okay, it is also a UK registered. I'm just telling you. Otherwise, you can find it directly by searching. Try to do that and try to find it out, and then ask me questions on WhatsApp group. Okay, it is little difficult, and this one on to you, Manish. I am
Hi,
done.
thank you, Neil. So guys, we have a few more slides which is upcoming. So what I'm going to do is I will cover all the slides by speaking on each and every part, and it is not required that I will read out. Probably you guys can read out at your end, but for this specifically slide which is in front of you, Neil, can you please expand that or in a mode, presentation mode? Yeah. So it is talking this slide will talk about the elements of AML CFT, AML CFT program. Okay, so it will have only 4 pillars. It usually have 4 pillars. Okay, so in the 4 pillars we defined it as first line of defense, second and third and fourth line of defense. On our yesterday's session also we are talking about which has been created by Basel committee, right? So this is somewhat similar to that, but this is specifically been created for any financial institution which have their AML program within their process. Okay, the first and foremost is the policies and procedures. Okay, so any bank, any process which you are working will have your own policy and procedures. So policy and procedures will be a draft which will be shared within the operation where you or me are actually working. So for example, there is a KYC process wherein as an analyst or senior analyst or the quality analyst will have their own policies, how they have to perform and what steps they have to follow. So it is like I would say a book. Probably when you read that, okay, these are the contents, first what all steps you have to take care and what all things you have to follow, and based on that analyst or the senior analyst probably works, which a bank named it as policies and procedures. Along with that, it has controls also. Controls in the sense, for example, tomorrow if at all anything is required, any changes on that policy and procedure, we need obviously approval from the management side, or the, if applicable, it also goes to the compliance officer. Okay, so in this process the policy will talk about how you have to work on, for example, okay, the first step would be CIP, second would be CDD, and even when you identify that when it is a high risk, you have to move for EDD. So all step by steps things are given, wherein it is a second copy of the process what you are actually doing. So application is one where we usually work, and the second thing would be side by side checking that what need to be followed. So this is what it is talking about, policy and procedure. It is not only about, also um, about the process. Probably it is sometime it is also about your compliance or your risk, how to mitigate that risk. All those information will be available on your policy and procedures. Second, we have a compliance officer or a compliance function. We can say it as second line of defense. So compliance officer plays a vital role in any of AML, in AML world specifically. Okay, so it has more authenticated powers which is been given by the senior management. He he or she usually works individually in the sense like decision making, if you talk about. And the possibility of influencing compliance officer is as part of his job, it is really zero, I would say. Influence in the sense the decision making power of the compliance officer is very strong, and it is always every time when it is required that, okay, if there are any changes on any monitoring system or any filtering system, or there is change in a KYC process or something like that, it first goes to compliance officer for the check and the approval. So that is second pillar I was talking about. And third, we have ongoing employee training program. So this name itself you can understand. So ongoing training program in the sense, even though if someone is onboarded as a new employee, hiring process at that point of time, training is the first and foremost crucial thing wherein everyone has to undergo. Ongoing training program talks about at the time of your process. Okay, so sometime you will be having your online training, sometime you have your classes training, which would be related to your own process. And the last, we have audit function. So it is called as independent audit function to test the overall effectiveness. So effectiveness in the sense, okay, the policy and procedures are in the place, the compliance officer is in place, the trainings are ongoing or trainings are being conducted. So who will look after it? So there should be someone that, okay, these all functions are into place, or the elements of AML safety, CFT are in place. Who is that person, or an authority or an individual or a group of people who will be accessing it? Okay, this all things are into the place. So it is not that senior management come into the picture and they will check, okay, what all things you have done and whether some everything is into the place or not. No, there is a different group of people where they usually access all those things, whether these all things are into place or not, or the trainings which is really required are being conducted or not, what is the duration of the training, how is the frequency of the training, what things are delivered on the training. So you would have gone some trainings and all, right? So for example, any training happens or conducted within office, you must sign your attendance, right? Most of the trainers, like 100% trainers does that. So why they do so? They actually required to keep that record to show in the audit function that, okay, this is what we have done and this is the date and these are the candidates who appeared for this training. Policies and procedures, how it is going on, they cross verify with the process audit function I'm talking about. These are the things what they actually focus on. Next slide, Neil. Okay, so we have here responsibility and accountabilities. You guys can read out side by side. I will be talking on this. Um, the first and foremost individual or the main person, as I was saying, that it compliance officer who plays a vital role. So it has their own responsibilities and accountability. So on our last slide also, I was talking about he is the one person who is accountable for in and out of your compliance process or the AML process. Okay, and it is not compulsory every time that there will be only one compliance officer for that entire project or the process. If at all it's on a huge process or operations of AML or KYC, there might be a responsibility of taking a chance, or the money laundering officer or a compliance officer. There will be a different compliance officer for that particular region or that particular process. Accountability, if you talk about, they are accountable for, you could read out, um, yeah, the second line for the first paragraph. This includes, but it is not limited to, designing and implementing the program, making necessary changes and updates, disseminating information about the program success and failures to key staff members, constructing AML CFT related content for staff training programs, and managing the institution adherence to applicable AML CFT laws and regulations, including staying current on legal and regulatory development in the field. So since I was talking about any changes is required in the process or any of the policies or the procedure, he is the one person who is accountable, and as per his responsibility, he will be the one who will design or do the changes whatever and wherever it is applicable. If you talk about the regulatory things, yes, like we one of the session we were talking about, we spoke about CTR, we have spoke about STR filings and all those stuff, right? So he will be the one person who will be responsible to sign off that okay, this is a perfect red flag or a suspicious, wherein we need to file or we need to sign off that particular STR, and we will send it to the regulatory body. So he is the one person who is accountable for those things. So we as an analyst or senior analyst or quality checker will be identifying it, accessing it, drafting it, and sending it to the compliance officer. But the final decision will goes to compliance officer only, and it is not compulsory, or I think it is not at all required that any of the senior management will come into the picture and they will say okay, it is required. No, he is the one who will be taking the decision on those things. Yeah, but reporting wise, if you talk about, or informing or information goes to the senior management at a different level when everything is done, and it is just a information for the audit purpose, that compliance officer usually give the information that these are the filings which is already done and this is what the status is, but the decision making will goes only to the compliance officer. The ability of the compliance officer to communicate effectively in both a written and verbal format is vital to success of an institution's AML CFT program. The compliance officer must also have the means to communicate at all levels of the organization, from frontline associates all the way up the CEO and board of directors. Tomorrow, one example I would give, for example, any of the internal transaction, it has been identified that okay, there is one of the director who is actually identified as a suspicious transaction, and his name is reflecting on that, and it has been already proven, and when it comes to the compliance officer on a check or something, he has that level of authority that he can file a STR or CTR or any of the required legal action on the board of directors to showcase in front of the other management level. So he can't deny that okay, he is the director of my company, probably I would ignore or I would just inform him. No, his responsibility is very straight and forward. It doesn't matter that whether at what level the company means that individual is, whether he is a company director, he is a MLA, or he is a part of any of the thing, or he is authorized person for that particular company. It doesn't matter for him. His responsibility is very straight and forward. It is illegal means it is illegal. That's all. If you talk about um, other regulatory bodies or the communication with the verbal or the written, compliance officer every and each time when he thinks that okay, this is what information has to go, he has to communicate in a verbal or a written, or sometimes it happens by all together as well. So whatever information he's drafting, or he got the information, or he's planning to write to some any regulatory body or any of the jurisdiction law or something, he should have their on record purpose. He should be having all the written format and the verbal format communication. If you could say that it should be a recording kind of thing, if at all it is a verbal communication to that particular regulatory body or the law enforcement. Next slide, Neil. Anyone has any question till now on compliance officer specifically? Okay. So this is the continuation of what I was talking about. So if you could see the main green highlight over here, it talks that compliance officer is responsible for the institution's overall AML compliance. Overall AML compliance is starting from your policies and procedures drafted till audit level. And correct me if I am wrong, Neil, if anything comes on audit or identified in audit, I think compliance officer is one of the accountable person who is answerable, right? Initial, if I say.
Right, Manish. And any issue found and which is not bearable just by the compliance officer, everybody is responsible. Most and the responsibility definitely, I mean, ultimate responsibility is of the directors, and initial responsibility, as you mentioned, is definitely compliance officer because of the breach identified by audit.
Yeah. And also like it is not that no one can question him. It is not like that. Obviously, your board of directors or the senior management, I could say that executive management like CEO, CFO, COO, all those people, they are people that who can question on the compliance officer. So for example, there are few transactions which is converted into more numbers of STR or CTR filed by the department. So there will be a question raised by the executive management or the board of directors, that why for this particular month or for this particular duration the CTR has been or the STR has been filed for so many numbers. So this is one of the example I am giving, that there are questions coming to the compliance officer if at all something deficiency is identified, or any transactions or which is not supposed to be but somehow it has been done or it has been missed. He is the one person who is accountable to respond and to identify what went wrong. For that also he has to draft all these things, that okay, these are the things which has been identified, this is the reason why the CTR and the STR has increased. Or if you n- keep aside CTR and STR also, even for the any transactions which is not supposed to be done with, but somehow by miss or system due to negligence of the analyst or senior analyst or the checker, he is the responsible to answer that and to identify what went wrong and what needs to be done. And to be very frank, it is known very well. We have already discussed in session, our previous session as well, wherein actually the required information which is not given is also one of the suspicious things. So at that point of time also, compliance officer or MLRO, which is money laundering reporting officer, has to respond that or to take the decision whether what would be the next step. So we as an analyst or senior analyst are not responsible. We are only responsible to give the information which is required, but the decision making obviously goes to the compliance officer. Okay, next slide, Neil. Neil, neil, next slide. So this particular slide talks about culture of compliance. Okay, how it has been established, right? So you can read out and you can understand that, or else I will read out for you this particular slide. Probably you can understand and then I can elaborate as well. So the ultimate responsibility for the AML CFT compliance program rests with the financial institution board of directors. So what does this mean? It is talking about ultimate, the word ultimate responsibility for the AML CFT compliance program rests with the board of directors, right? So I was talking about creating, drafting, all those stuffs, decision making will go to the compliance officer, but the ultimate responsibility would be only the board of directors. Next line says the board of directors, the board and senior management must set the tone from the top by openly voicing their commitment to the AML CFT program, ensuring that their commitment flows through all services areas and lines of business, and holding responsible parties accountable for compliance. Okay. An adequate AML CFT program costs money that management may be reluctant to spend. The compliance officer challenge is to convince management that an AML CFT program is an indispensable expense to protect the institution and to avert legal problems and reputational harm. So obviously, being sitting at any senior management level or board of directors, obviously they will be having a focus that everything should be in line and length, including the cost of it, right? So being a compliance officer, his responsibility talks that even though the cost involved for this particular program, setting up all those things, the cost is so and so, that should not matter for him. So his responsibility is to convince and to check that these are the things and this would be the outcome if we follow this particular policies and procedure, or this framework probably will help our financial institution to get it, to save their own risk, and to save anything as which comes to the as harm for the financial institution. Okay, the compliance staff should be seen as trusted advisors so that the business line staff will come to the compliance staff when they have question and will follow the advice provided. As I was talking about CTR or STR specifically, that is our responsibility to identify, check, draft and send it to compliance officer, but ultimate responsibility for sign off will be compliance, will be for compliance officer, or the money laundering reporting officer. Apart from that, if at all you have, or we as a employee for that particular process or project, you have anything which is not understandable, or you need some additional training, or you think that okay, this went wrong, sorry guys, this went wrong, or something that which you which you thought that okay, it should not be in a way it should be, and somehow you missed it, and it is your responsibility obviously, which you will go and check with your manager or to the compliance officer, okay, this is what we have and what can be done, or this is a miss out what it has been done. So the last paragraph is totally talks about whatever the questions you have, or you think that you need to check with your compliance officer, you can very well go to him or her, and you can check and you can talk to them that okay, this is what is in front of me and what would be the solution for that. Next slide, Neil. Hold on. Yeah, so anyone has any questions, probably they can just ask on chat box. I will just pause for a minute. No. So you have questions and answers around right now. Okay. So the question in front of you is role, responsibilities, and accountability of compliance officer. So you can just read out and understand which all options are applicable. You have three options, wherein two will be for the third one, which is all of the above. So I will read out for you guys. Responsible for managing all aspects of the AML CFT compliance program, staff training program, managing the institution adherence to applicable AML CFT laws and regulations. Second option we have communicate effectively in both a written and verbal formal in vital to the success of an institution's AML CFT program. May I have the answers, please? Pathu says C, means both. Great. That's right. Yeah. Next question, Neil. What are the four pillars of AML CFT program? So guys, you need to type in a keyword or a sentence or whatever you feel. It is asking for what are the four pillars of AML CFT program. You can type the
Guys,
keywords if
do you remember the three line of defense by Basel? At least three are there from there only, and one was extra in this pillar. Type fast, yeah. Guys, what happened? Not even one pillar you remember from that slide or yesterday's line of defense? Policy procedures, control, compliance function with compliance officer, independent audit report. Yes, this was there, right? And there is one more, not BSA, Basel. It was there, not BSA Act, right? So this is from today. So what is the one pillar? I think yes. Manish, is that correct?
yeah.
Ongoing training, exactly. See, the principles are matching with each other, right? Basel, what said, becomes a pillar of AML as well. Okay, so these are very common and very similar principles. Correct, correct. Everybody correct. Go on, Manish.
Yeah. So who is accountable for the managing overall CFT, AML CFT compliance function? Accountable for managing overall AML CFT program compliance function, or you could say.
Okay. Right,
Next we
Patro.
have, yeah, UBO is individual or entity? Individual.
Right.
Next we have who is ultimate responsible for the overall AML CFT compliance program? CEO.
Any other thoughts? CEO is very busy, guys. Yes, board of directors.
Correct.
Yes, exactly. The bank, but who runs the bank? Bank is a legal person. Who runs it? Okay. And
So yeah.
yeah, Manish, yes, I'm done. I'm done. I'm done.
Okay. So it yeah, management. You can call it as board of directors actually.
Yeah, the ones who
Okay.
have decision making power, who can
Yeah.
influence any decision, are the ones.
Okay, so bank is a legal form actually. Okay, so it is not that he is like ultimate responsible. He is like what to say, uh, tangible, one of the thing that you can just see, but he or she can't means who is taking the responsibility is the question. So it is board of directors, right? Okay, I think we are done. Neil, can you check? Yeah,
Okay,
thank you
guys.
guys,
Hope you
and
found.
yeah,
Yeah. So hope you found this session useful today, uh, with the live case and the compliance function what Manish has inculcated to you. Okay, just remember these one. These are one of the most important things, and it will help you to go through and do. Remember to do that remaining